play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock? Well, no, that's actually not true. I'm getting geeky in Irving, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas. In fact, we're right next to DFW Airport. This is Shane Plays Geek Talk, and I am recording at North Texas RPG Con. Didn't get North Texas RPG Con in 2020 because of COVID. Well, they had it, but they literally said don't show up because we don't want people to get sick, and 80 people still showed up. But this year, we got lots of people here, lots of great gaming. I did a show about North Texas a couple of years ago, talking about how much I liked it. And one of the people I met in 2019 was Ned Leeds. And we played a game called FASERIP Tactics. And I took pictures and notes for I was going to do a blog post and a podcast, and just didn't follow up with didn't follow up with Ned like I needed to. And he has graciously agreed to sit down with me at this North Texas RPG Con to talk about FASERIP Tactics. So what FASERIP Tactics is basically a superhero war game, that a tactical war game that adapts the FASERIP system from the Marvel Superheroes game from TSR. So we're going to be talking about that, and it's really cool. I was super impressed when I played it a couple of years ago, and from what I understand, they've released even more information for the game. But Ned is also just a big gamer. We were talking before the show, just his history with cons and this and that and the other, and so I just wanted to talk us through a little bit with your history with gaming, Ned. You said you started going to Gen Con in 2020? 2000.
Yeah. So I'm about 44. But yeah, my history in gaming, and probably the reason why I have such a soft spot in my heart for FASERIP, or Marvel Superheroes as it's known, is that was kind of my first library game as a kid in the 80s, was Marvel TSR.
Library game?
Well, growing up in New York, I grew up in New York, and so a lot of the gaming that would happen, a lot of us lived in apartments that were too small. So kids would meet up at the library.
Actually go to the library.
Actually, a library with physical books.
Whoa.
No, and then we would hang out, and they'd always let people in there. And libraries tended not to ask too many questions. If they saw you, doing a seance or something, they might come out and bother you in the 80s. But in general, it was a decent place to get together and play things like Dungeons and Dragons. But for me, I was a huge comic book geek. I had the fortune of growing up next to the son of, at the time, the vice president of DC Comics. So I got...
I was trying, you told me that a couple of years ago, and I couldn't remember where you got all these free DC Comics.
Well, the irony was I grew up next to the son, or the family. The vice president of DC Comics at the time is actually, he's in the Comic Book Hall of Fame, is a guy named Joe Orlando. He also,
sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, familiar with him. All right, well, I was good friends with his son. His son, ironically, hated comic books, growing up with a dad whose life was about comic books. But what would happen in the 80s, and I don't know if it still happens, is DC and Marvel would give each other what are called complimentary copies. And they would put a giant stamp on the cover that said complimentary copies. And essentially, if you were an executive for DC, you would get all of Marvel's books and vice versa, right?
Yeah,
and it was a way to...
still goes on.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, maybe digital now, but... it was a way to, I guess, just let the other company know what they were doing, make sure we don't do the same exact thing. I'm not exactly sure. End result was, I was a poor kid growing up in New York, but I had access to essentially every Marvel comic book that came out every week. And so I voraciously read them. So, huge Marvel fan.
Right.
Absolutely love the characters. So 80s Marvel, for those of you who are familiar, it's generally regarded as, it's not really silver, it's more like golden. It's more like bronze-ish, modern age. Yeah,
right.
And some of the best books that came out, or some of the best story arcs ever, I think, in comic books.
They're mining that stuff for the movies and stuff.
Yeah,
TV shows now. It's
right.
The '80s was a wonderful time to be into comics.
Absolutely, yeah. The comics had matured to the point where they weren't complete goofball stories anymore.
Right.
They had a little bit of a mature edge. You like them or love them or hate them, but you had your Claremont kind of long-running X-Men arcs, which are all pretty famous.
Right.
You had your George Perez Avengers,
right.
Kind of classic stuff. So that was my wheelhouse. Marvel, 80s, love it. And when TSR, Jeff Grubb, created TSR's Marvel Superheroes, it was literally a dream come true.
Right.
I had played a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, mostly your second edition. Played a little first with some older brothers of friends. Didn't really get what was going on. Couldn't really get into it. But the initial yellow box set, for those of you who are familiar, just kind of like shows a bunch of heroes jumping out of it. It's got the Hulk. It's got SpiderMan, Hulk, Wolverine, Iron Man, Cap, and
it's one. In my opinion, it's one of the most recognizable RPG covers and boxes because that yellow pops.
Yeah.
And then it's like they're breaking through a brick wall.
Yes.
And there's like 4, and it's just a great cover. It's one of the top 5 or top 3 RPG covers of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and another great thing about that box set was, unlike something like first edition AD&D, and I would even argue second edition AD&D, which I love both of those. If you put those in the hands of an aspiring 12 or a 13-year-old, you're going to get like a lot of gobbledygook. It's kind of hard for a 13-year-old to get their arms around second edition D&D. Basics a different story, but with Marvel's TSR, they literally built that box set so that if you were a reasonably sharp 12, 13-year-old kid, you could run your 12-year-old buddies through that initial adventure.
That was the target.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
They
Color cutouts of all the heroes, a really quick, easy-to-use mechanic, which we'll get to in a second, where everything was essentially unified around one dice roll, right? So the game just comes with 2 10-sided die,
right. And
the mechanic is essentially revolves around this universal table. And so those 2 things, quick, easy to run adventure called Day of the Octopus, and then those color cutouts, which are hard to find in the box sets because everybody cut them out. It's just a quick way to get up and running and have fun immediately, right? So
yeah, it was wonderfully written. It had a section. It had like an intro book where SpiderMan kind of walked you through everything.
Yes, it's narrated by SpiderMan.
Right,
how cool! Yeah,
SpiderMan. You could jump in and start playing very quickly. My only, and I'm not critiquing it because I understand the target audience. The only thing I ever felt lacking in the yellow box was the magic wasn't explained very well.
Yeah.
They had like a 2-page spread where Doctor Strange talked about magic.
Yeah.
I felt that was kind of, but other than that, it was wonderfully put together, wonderfully done.
Definitely, yeah.
One of my favorite nostalgia hits still today. Of course, they came out with the advanced system or the advanced box a year or 2 later.
Yeah, I immediately picked that up because same deficiencies you kind of walked into. Like, I want more powers. I want a better character creation system.
Well, I think the Yellow Box didn't even have a character creation system, right? I think it was the Advanced before you got, I think.
I have to refresh my memory, but the Advanced gave us a way better character creation system. It gave us more characters, period, so it had a nice judge's book with all the characters in it. So a little bit more polish, and then it had a more advanced combat system. And so that's, I'd say 90% of the Marvel that I played back then was actually advanced.
But it was advanced, it was still very accessible. It was
definitely.
The game was built from the ground up to be super accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like when you read old reviews of it, that's one of the critiques. But these are like, adult reviewers reviewing it for like college-age players,
right?
And that wasn't the
Champions guy reviewing Marvel Superheroes is going to shit crap on it,
right?
Because he can't dial his laser beam down to some number of points, and
right? It's just a different audience.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward. That's one of my favorite role-playing games of all time. I also got into minis gaming, Mage Knight, D&D miniatures, Star Wars miniatures. So I love tactical kind of war games. There is a pretty popular miniatures superhero game called HeroClix.
Right, and everybody's going to know HeroClix.
Everyone's going to know HeroClix,
It came out of, I think, Mage Knight.
Correct.
Which was a fantasy minis tactical combat game.
Yep.
I call it chess with dice.
Very much so,
is what I call it. Then HeroClix came out, which was miniatures that were based on Marvel.
First
DC,
Marvel, then they got DC, and they got independent.
Characters. There's been a huge HeroClix fan base, even still today. Actually, I got pretty heavy into HeroClix when it first came out. I kind of lost touch with it after a year or 2, but I see it's still played super heavy today. So they started HeroClix in the early 2000s. Came out of Mage Knight.
Jordan Weissman patented that click base, and so it, in a lot of ways, HeroClix was to war games as to what Marvel Superheroes was to role playing, because it's really simple.
That's a good comparison.
Super simple, right? I don't need Warhammer. I don't need a giant codex to come play this war game with my friend. Everything I need is on the dial, right? So that was definitely the promise of HeroClix, and HeroClix is okay. It's just there was a point at which HeroClix kind of spiraled out of control in terms of the number of minis that were there to collect, and the latest greatest was a chase, and it was a $300 Thor's Mjolnir was, you needed it, and you stuck it on Shazam, which didn't make any comic book sense. And so I played it for a number of years. I actually top 8'd a couple of the worlds, HeroClix, but it
you top 8? What do you mean?
Top 8'd some of the bigger worlds tournaments back in the day with HeroClix. Okay. So I did like the game. I played it a lot, but it had two big flaws for me. One was you weren't incentivized at all to maintain any kind of comic book accuracy, right? So you could approach HeroClix like a minis war game or min-max it and put Shazam with Black Panther with the Hobgoblin. It didn't really matter.
But to be honest, that was intentional in the game, was that you could mix and match clicks, figures. And,
good, evil, all that stuff.
You could build your dream team. And,
you could, but... Yeah. You know, that's not how the comic books work, right? Like, I wanted the... You
wanted to simulate comic book battles, exactly.
Yes, okay. Yeah. And the other big thing was it lacked what a lot of minis games have in terms of multiple ways to win the game, right? So just to harken back again to Marvel, the role-playing game, there was a mechanic called Karma, and one of the things that the heroes, you were really heavily incentivized to play heroes in the role-playing game, and if your hero killed anybody, he or she would lose their karma, okay? Right. In other words, the game tried to push you to play...
in 80s mainstream comic books, heroes didn't kill.
Correct, yeah.
You know, and even when the characters like the Punisher, it was never, you know, they didn't do a big gory bloodbath out of it, even though he was mowing people down.
Right.
It was just a different tone and a different feel.
You got it, yeah.
Right, yeah.
So, but I wanted to enable multiple ways to win the game. And in HeroClix in particular, the only way to win is to just eliminate your opponent's team. Or to eliminate one figure and then run and hide, right? Wouldn't it be great if our superhero game actually could follow a narrative, and SpiderMan could win the game if he could unmask the Hobgoblin, right? And you could win the game that way.
I remember that when we played a couple of years ago, there was objectives.
Right.
And if I remember, each side had an objective.
Correct.
That was it randomly determined? I can't
no, you choose them, and they're themed to your plot. So yeah, so just basically back to the design goals. So retain the spirit of those great rules from the 80s from the Marvel game. Be faithful to the source material. So that's in this case Marvel Comics.
Right.
Create a deep enough tactical game that it's interesting, but much like the RPG, just have one mechanic. Everything is resolved with one mechanic.
With the FASERIP chart.
And then the last design objective was, let's enable multiple ways to win the game. So not just killing your opponent's figures, but let's figure out some interesting ways to win the game that don't involve killing. Yeah. So that was the guts of it. Yep.
I want to take a moment, because you're actually going through design objectives. So one of the things that impressed me a couple of years ago, and you know, when there was a chance of playing again this year, I was like, heck yeah, I'll play, was your approach, and I don't know how many people you work with. Is it just you? Is it some other
it's me and one other guy who really designed the figures, who play test, and then maybe half a dozen kind of core local play testers. Yeah.
But the game, both the approach and the finished product, feels more polished than some games on the shelves. So, you know, you have a very professional, even though you're wanting to have this, because you're not making money off this.
No, right? It's all free, of course.
It's all free. It's a fan thing, but it's the quality really impressed me. So how much time have you, and you're still releasing new sets. And
right.
So how much time have you put into FASERIP Tactics?
Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of hours. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Between
so like you put an equivalent amount of time that like some game companies put into games. I mean, it's
I'm
this
sure.
This isn't some.
No.
Friends did this over a weekend.
No.
This is a highly polished game.
Yeah, it's a highly polished game. It's evolved. We're on, the third or fourth revision of the rules. I've brought it to conventions here, Gen Con, Origins. So yeah, and I'm very confident that if you're into this kind of game, that you'll have a good time. I'm very confident that you can grasp the rules because, again, they're kind of all based on this one simple mechanic. And yeah, we think it's a great game. We think it's a fun way to experience kind of a hole in the retro gaming market, right? So yeah. I'm happy to hear you had a good time. We do think it's a great game.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. We played 2 or 3 times, if I remember right, and I really enjoyed it. I'd have been happy if the first con I came to, that was the only gaming I did because it was a lot of fun. So, but yeah, I wanted, before I forget, I was very impressed with your approach because the way you discuss the game, explain the game, talk about the support of the game, it's like a game company. And so there's that level of detail and professionalism in it. So
if you're going to do something and put it out to the public, you should have some pride in your work. Never be afraid to accept feedback from people. Right. But yeah, it's if it's worth putting together and putting out to the public, try to do a good job on it. I take that approach in my professional life, and in this, I wanted to at least do a good enough job to where I'd be proud to show the game to somebody and get their feedback. So yeah.
So we will definitely get into the mechanics and the flow of the game, the types of characters that are available, that sort of thing. How long has FASERIP Tactics been out now?
So I want to say we're going on our 6th year, with this past year kind of just being a mulligan as far as 2020 just being able to get out and go to conventions. So yeah, it's been about 6 years. Yeah.
So what kind of community has built up? What kind of feedback have you gotten? Do you have people that you don't even know that are playing it?
I know of about a dozen people who are actively playing it through our Facebook groups.
Right.
And there's probably somewhere around 40-ish people who I've demoed to over the years, and then another 6 to 8 who play it locally. So not a really big following, but I haven't really promoted it very often.
I think it could get there, though.
Yeah, certainly.
I think it has the potential. So if somebody's interested, they go to is Facebook the best place to get connected with the community? Or?
Yeah, there's a FASERIP Tactics website, and you can add that in your show notes.
Yeah, I definitely will.
And that'll lead you to a Facebook page, but that initial page has the rules. I'll get into what a folio is, but essentially it'll let you print out the folio for any character, download a copy of the universal table. Everything you need to play, and it's essentially print and play at this point, is available from that core website. And the Facebook group is a great place to ask questions. Yeah.
So is that an open group, or do they submit a request to join?
They ping me and I allow them in. Yeah, so it's open, but me or the other admin just basically let anybody in who asks. Yeah.
And just if somebody's, it's FASERIP is FASERIP.
Exactly, yeah, and that's an acronym for the original Marvel TSR game. The attributes that any character in that game had were fighting agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psyche. And, Jeff, I don't know if Jeff Grubb meant it to happen, but it actually formed a word that you could enunciate.
Yeah.
So it's colloquially known as FASERIP. In fact, there is a retro clone of Marvel TSR, which I'm not sure if he called it FASERIP or not, but essentially it's a serial numbers filed off version of FASERIP. He may have changed fighting to Brawlin and something like that to keep...
so it's BASRIP.
Yes, it'd be BASRIP. Yeah.
BASRIP.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about that core mechanic that drives everything, which keeps the simplicity of the original role-playing system. So anybody that has spent any time around role-playing games at all and looked up any history of role-playing games is probably it's this classic green, yellow, red columns where you have a target number, and then you have your my fighting is let's talk about that too real quick. This chart uses another innovation that Jeff Grubb and company came up with. Instead of saying I have a strength of 18, they said, well, my strength is amazing.
Yep.
Which also has a numerical value for it.
Correct.
Or it's incredible, or it's pitiful, or it's So that was the other thing. Instead of worrying about numbers, make it all words. So you have, well, I'm trying to do something that is amazingly difficult.
Yep.
And my fighting score is incredible. So you match those up on the column, and it tells you what you need to roll, right?
Yeah, basically. So you've got that. They're trying to keep that comic book feel, right? So their idea, which was brilliant at the time, was to tag what essentially are numbers under the hood with these fun monikers, right? So excellent,
Which
typical,
I
good.
That when
Yeah.
the game
Oh, it's
came
great.
out.
Yeah.
Oh, my strength is monstrous.
Monstrous, right?
Yeah.
And you can just by mouthing it out figure out that good and monstrous. Monstrous has got to be better than good, right?
That's another thing. It's immediately obvious.
Yeah, unearthly. It's got to be better than feeble, right? So, but yeah, the core mechanic in the RPG game is simply this: there's a table, and it looks a lot like the periodic table. But anyway, down the y-axis is 0 to 100. And again, the game only uses essentially a D100 mechanic.
Right.
And
it comes with 2 percentile dice.
That's
all
it.
you need.
That's all you need.
Like RuneQuest.
And then the x-axis are these incremental ranks, as they call them, going from feeble, think Aunt May's strength is likely feeble, poor, typical, good, excellent, all the way up to unearthly and these other values called Shift X, Y, and Z. But just to give you some quick goalposts, the Hulk would have unearthly strength.
And the thing had monstrous, right?
And the thing had monstrous strength,
Right.
yeah. So from left to right, you're heading up, getting more and more and more powerful. And so now you've basically created this grid with the left-hand side being how high you're rolling, or the y-axis, and the x-axis being these ranks going up. And another awesome innovation that the team that designed the original FASERIP made was rather than just having a binary result, which is how AD&D was, you either hit or you didn't hit.
Yeah, you have levels of success.
You have levels of success, and the chart shows you your level of success, with a white result being basically no success, a green being, you kind of got the job done, yellow, you did a good job, and red, you absolutely killed it, right? So it added another aspect to the game, and if you think about comic books and how they wanted to portray the success of a comic book, in comic books, you have degrees of success. The Punisher punches a thug, and the thug falls to the ground. SpiderMan punches a thug, and he might knock him clean out of the window.
Yeah,
but if the Hulk grabs a thug, he can throw him all the way to New Jersey.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, right.
So, it was this brilliant, simple thing, and that's essentially how you resolve everything in the original RPG, and there are some...
Now, the degrees are only to the success. There's no degrees of failure, right?
There's no degrees of failure, right.
So you either fail or you have different degrees of success.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that universal mechanic was something we wanted to maintain. We wanted the game essentially to use that throughout so that you could print that universal table out. Each of us have a copy of it. We got our 2 10-sided dice, and that's pretty much all we need to do to figure out. Now, finding the rank you need to use for a particular thing, that is all part of the game mechanics. But essentially, once you learn how to use this chart, everything else falls into place, just like the role-playing game.
Right. Okay. Well, so now that we understand the FASERIP, I say FASERIP, I guess you say FASERIP.
Sure. Yeah, I have no idea what's right. Well, we'll get Jeff Grubb here
we'll
at some
get Jeff Grubb to it, and he'll say, no, it's a FASERIP. So that's the core mechanic.
Yep.
It drove the entire RPG for the most part.
Yep.
And for the most part, it drives FASERIP Tactics. So tell us a little bit about FASERIP Tactics. What I remember is that, you have a scenario, you got 2 competing sides that are going to duke it out because it's 80s comic books, so I want to see stuff duking it out.
Yep.
Each side had like an objective they wanted to try to get to.
Yep.
And the combat turns were like issues of a page. Or no, pages of an issue.
Correct,
right?
yeah.
So like page 1, page 2, page 3.
You and me having a game is called an issue, just like a comic book. And the way that we break the game up, instead of using terms like turns and rounds and so on and so forth, we use pages and panels and activations, right? So we want to try to keep a comic book theme. But to roll back to the actual teams that we're using is the other thing we wanted to keep simple, and again, harkening back to the role-playing game, there's a lot of war games. If you've played Warhammer, is very popular, even HeroClix. typically you're building your team out of a pool of points. So you and me might sit down to play Warhammer, and we might play a 4,000 point battle.
We build our list and all
we're building these lists, and we're trying to squeeze every last point out of our 4,000, and an orc might be 10, and a giant ballista might be 100. We decided to simplify it down to some very chunky levels to make it simple for a comic book game. And essentially, every figure that you might choose to put on your team in FASERIP just simply has a level of renown. And the levels of renown are minion, and that would be like your thug on the street, a beat cop, a scientist. Bold, which means a hero who's sort of locally known. Their renown is local, so think Moon Knight or maybe even an early version of the Punisher might be bold. We have heroic, which is heroic heroes are, think SpiderMan. He's got an established level of renown around the New York area, and most of the country knows about him. And then we start to get into, once you get past heroic, you have things like legendary. So think Doc Strange, the Hulk, Professor Xavier, even Captain America, despite having no real superpowers. Right. His renown is legendary.
I would say the Fantastic Four as well.
Mostly all legendary. The Thing, Mr. Fantastic. So it's a really easy to use way of defining the level of power for a character. So when we go back to build our team, instead of having to get out a slide rule to figure out the number of figures we can fit on the team, you and me just decide to play something like HHHBB, meaning three
heroes, 2 bolts.
You got it. That's it.
Right.
That's it. And then the only other decision we have to make is whether or not we want to side with good or evil. And all that does for us is it means if you choose good, it means you can only have good characters or enigmatic characters on your team. Can't have any evil ones.
So enigmatic are people that kind of walk the line.
You got it. Yeah, your Punisher is maybe your Wolverine. I think is technically good, but just in terms of characters who have flip flopped, maybe mercenary type, like Deadpool, Elektra. Deadpool. Yep, all good examples of Black Cat. Those are enigmatic characters. So that's team building. You basically pick good or evil. We decide on HHHBB or L or whatever we want. We throw together a couple teams. And they may or may not share. The last part of team building is many figures, not all of them, will have a team affiliation, which is typical for comic books. So SpiderMan has Marvel Knights. Right. Doctor Strange has Marvel Knights. Cyclops has X-Men. Sure. The Kingpin has Sinister Syndicate. Magneto has Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And again, we're about 4 or 5 sets deep now. And we've introduced a variety of teams: Fantastic Four, S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, Thunderbolts. Let
me ask you real quick, because you do release sets periodically. How much playtesting goes into these sets? Like, how tweaked are they?
We try to test each figure 2 or 3 times at least. I think now we're on our 5th set. There's a pretty good base level to know whether a figure is hopelessly broken. But we still give it a run 2, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times to make sure that it's not too powerful.
Am I right in remembering that one set might have, and I could be wrong, and maybe I'm having a confused memory, that you might have a Spider-Man from one set and a Spider-Man from another set that has a different build? Yeah, right?
Some of the most popular characters. So, for example, the first Spider-Man we released is in the first set called Marvel Takes Manhattan. Marvel Takes Manhattan is obviously based around Manhattan, so you have Marvel Knights. And then you have the Sinister Syndicate. So we released a Spider-Man who was Marvel Knights, and he was in the first set. But the 4th set we released was a mini set, so it's either a big set or a mini set. A mini set is essentially reserved for a famous Marvel comic event. This one was easy. Every 80s kid was going to pick it.
Right.
Secret Wars. We did our first mini set with Secret Wars. Well, Secret Wars is famous for introducing
black costume.
You got it.
Sure. Yeah.
So we put a black costume Spider-Man in there. And when he was on Battle World, he wasn't necessarily affiliated with Marvel Knights, so we didn't give him any team affiliation at all. You can have a team affiliation or not have one. And he's slightly different from the one we released in Marvel Takes Manhattan. And the rule in the game is pretty simple. You can't have 2 versions of Spider-Man on your own team.
Right.
You have to pick one.
It's got, like you said, you want it to feel like it is a battle in a comic book.
Yes.
It's not just a build. It's not
min-maxing exercise.
Right.
Yeah.
You want thematically satisfying.
Yeah. And I want to reward you for putting together a thematic team. Right. So there's mechanics in the game that allow characters who share a team affiliation to do special things together. So you're really incentivized to play a bunch of X-Men. And for you to just stick the Punisher on your X-Men team, yeah, he might be the best, like, ranged character in the game, but you're going to lose a little grease that you'd normally get if you had just put Dazzler on your team, who's an X-Men. That makes sense. Yep.
And that reflects the fact that they train together,
yes.
they know each other.
Right, yep. So, yeah, that's team building. That's team affiliations. That's that uniqueness rule that we have. And so Spider-Man might have 3... So as of the time we're recording this, Wolverine, Hulk, Spider-Man are some of the figures that have had multiple versions. So just to give you an example, the first Spider-Man is Spider-Man Friendly Neighborhood, meaning his name is Spider-Man, and then he has a version of Friendly Neighborhood, right? And then the Spider-Man from Battleworld, I believe, is Spider-Man. I think his version is Back in Black, right? Okay. So, you've got the different versions there. And so it's fun to watch characters who have long history kind of evolve a whole copy.
But the hero name trumps the version.
You got it.
No, so you can't have 2 Spider-Man.
Correct.
No matter what.
Correct.
Right.
Now, there's 2 exceptions to that, and you can dig through the rules.
I guess you could, pull out Ben Reilly or something.
Well, then he'd be Ben Reilly, clone of Peter or whatever.
So, So you said there were exceptions. So
2 quick exceptions. One is, who doesn't want to fight against the nameless, endless ranks of AIM and Hydra, right? So there's a special version called Minion. So if you're a minion, you can have as many as you want on your team.
Well, because there's something incredibly satisfying about pounding on.
Oh yeah, hordes of moloids or whatever, whatever are out there.
Beekeepers.
And there's one named character who is also a version minion, just because it's just his nature, and that's Kang. So so Kang is one guy that breaks the rules. There's hundreds of
So
Kangs.
minion doesn't necessarily indicate power level. It just means that you can have more than one on there.
You got it. Yeah. It's also the lowest number. But so there is a mechanic in the game for you to build Mole Man and 12 Moloids if you wanted to play that. Yeah. So we took that into account.
Well, I'm glad that you do. You obviously have respect for Marvel. Because Kang is just wonderfully weird, and he breaks. Even is he a hero? Is he a bad guy? Is he both? Is he fighting himself? Is he the future version? It's so crazy stuff with Kang.
Yeah, a couple of things that we always had in mind is in your superhero tactical minis game, you got to rule 1: Captain America has to be pretty good and playable. If he's not, start your game over. Second one is make sure you can play as Kang because he's one of my favorite villains of all time. So
he's just crazy. No 2 Kang stories are ever alike.
No, he's one of my favorites. So that's team building. That's kind of like I said, the cadence of the game is kind of easy to follow. An issue, pages, panels, activations. And then as far as what actually constitutes a character, so what is Spider-Man? What can he do? We follow pretty closely to the source RPG. Those same FASERIP attributes are on every character. There's 2 other attributes in the game called Health and Karma. Health is sort of the amount of abuse.
So Karma carried over into...
Absolutely. Karma is very important in the miniatures game.
Is it almost spendable points to...
it's a currency, and so it's an ablative currency that will essentially, you can use to help you when you need a little extra oomph.
Right.
So to give you a quick example, you could spend Karma to increase your speed by 1, right? You could spend Karma to re-roll a particularly bad roll. You can spend Karma to take an attribute, a FASERIP, right? And increase it by 1 rank. So think about when Spider-Man really has to lift the bus. His strength is normally incredible, which is about 10 tons.
Right.
But let's just say he has to lift 15 tons to make sure that,
So it's the heroic moment.
You got it. Yeah.
Now, I could be having a confused memory here. I know there's a main objective. Were there secondary objectives that would let you get Karma, or am I...
So, there are some characters that let you get Karma, but in general, Karma is a currency you spend.
And it's gone.
But in addition to choosing the characters for your team, you have to choose at least 1 plot. Right. And so the plots that ship with the game, almost every team has a team-specific plot. So I'll give you a simple example. The X-Men's plot is called Danger Room. And the plots are represented on the map by tokens.
I remember that.
And then you want to get to your plot and what's called advance it, right? Makes sense. You advance the plot.
Advance the plot,
right.
right.
And so every plot has a different way of being advanced. Some of them will use your fighting. Some of them will use your intelligence. So
you have to like get to the token and then do
advance
an action,
it.
right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So advancing a plot typically does two things for you. One, it gives you what's called a victory point, and victory points are the currency of winning in this game. You can get victory points by advancing plots or by KOing out your opponents, but you could win the entire game never KOing an opponent. Just advancing your plots over and over. Then, if the person advances...
I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a slugfest.
Right.
But it's also cool to strategically be like, how can I keep them from doing that? And then, so it's not just about...
You can play offense, you can play defense. Yeah. There are some characters that really break the rules and let you advance the plot faster, like Mystique. She's a super spy. Quicksilver is very fast. He can go twice a turn. There's some cool ways.
That's what I'm talking about. The level of playability in here, and it works very smooth. As it's just as polished as if I went into a store and bought this, I wouldn't be upset. I'm like, this is a very, very fine-tuned game. So.
Yeah. Well, don't buy it and don't give me any money. Just download it and play it for free.
Yeah. Let's be very clear. There's no selling, no buy. I mean, this is purely for fan stuff.
Correct.
And nobody's trying to make money off of anybody.
Do not want it. I'll send it back to you. Yeah.
Right.
So that's sort of the ways you can win the game, knocking out your opponents as well as advancing these plots. Back to my Danger Room example. If you were to run up with Shadowcat and advance the Danger Room plot, it allows you to increase the attribute, so attribute is FASERIP, of any teammate, X-Men, so you have to be an X-Men to get the benefit from it, by 1 until the end of the page. So think about the Danger Room. What does the Danger Room do for the X-Men? They go in there, they learn how to fight. So it buffs your X-Men temporarily until the end of the turn. Another cool one is S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s plot is called Helicarrier Assault. And if a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent advances the Helicarrier Assault plot, all of his or her S.H.I.E.L.D. teammates gain flight until the end of the page.
Nice.
So get Nick Fury up there, get the helicarrier in the air, and now all your little mook, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents on the ground are now all of a sudden flying, which is a power that grants you some advantages in the game. So
and so speaking of the tactical nature, it's, if I remember right, it's squares. So to kind of explain what a map would look like.
Yeah. So without endorsing any one brand of minis or maps to use, one of the things you can use with this. Well, first of all, facing doesn't matter. So if you're a miniatures aficionado or a tactical wargaming aficionado, we don't necessarily worry about facing in this game. The best way to play it is on a square gridded map, and obviously they're HeroClix make an awesome substitute. They're 32 millimeters. They work in 1.5-inch squares. There's tons of maps that have been printed both by the makers of HeroClix, and you can go out and buy a bajillion different fan-made to the same scale maps. So pick any map that you like, that's fun, that you have around.
Squares, inch square, I can't remember.
HeroClix is a little bit bigger. It's about 1.5 inches. Okay. HeroClix are 32 millimeters.
So a D&D map
be a little too small.
Slightly off scale.
Yeah, those are inches.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can play the game with chess pieces. There's nothing stopping you.
Play whatever you want to represent.
The heroes.
You could make little paper tokens if you want.
Exactly.
You can do whatever you want.
Pogs, whatever you want.
Yeah, whatever you want. And I had another question I was going to ask you, and I can. Like I said, it's squares. Facing doesn't matter.
Right.
Hexes. It's not hexes. It's just
use squares. Yeah, because the facing doesn't matter. Yeah, and you start on one side of the map essentially, and I start on the other. There's a process in the rules for placing your figures and placing those plot tokens, but you do it once or twice, and it's pretty much second nature. So the setup should be quick. I mean, you should be able to get the game set up in, besides the printing process, set up in 10 minutes, and you're ready to go.
So, and again, you can go to the FASERIP website, and all of the materials are free. You can download, print out all the materials for free,
and you can search the character database as well. So, if you're just dying to know what all the X-Men are, there's an easy to use search for all the X-Men, and everything you need to use a particular character is on what we call a folio, and it's pretty simple. It has their FASERIP statistics. It has their attacks. So let's just use SpiderMan. SpiderMan can attack in two ways. One is he can shoot his webs, and the other way is colloquially called Sensational Spidey, which basically is a fun comic book way of saying he's punching you. And then all figures have traits, and those key off each other. So, for example, Spider-Man is a scientist, alter ego, and streetwise. And so there are other abilities, plots, and powers that will key off of those interesting things. Like, for example, Sabretooth is a mutant hunter, right? So he gets a special bonus to attack anyone who has the trait mutant, right? Yeah. Right. So those are traits, and those are static, and they're fun. They help you build teams.
So each character has what some people think of like in a website metaphor, tags.
They're tags. That's all they are. They're static tags. Yep. And then the last piece is their specials, which are, sort of the more interesting part of some superheroes. So, for example, Spider-Man has 3 specials that make him cool and unique. One is Spider Senses, which we all get. And so Spider Senses says, when he is attacked for the first time each page, make an intuition feat, and on success, the attack fails, right? So that represents his Spider Senses and his ability to sort of always dodge that first bullet. He has another one called Wall Crawler, and it says ignores difficult terrain and elevation changes for the purposes of movement.
So he just moves from one square to the next
without regard of
which is a nice way to abstract that.
Yep. So Spider-Man can go wherever he wants. He can go up on top of the building, etc.
Is that kind of the similar what Flight does? It lets you traverse different.
Flight also lets you do that. Yeah, sort of ignore the terrain. So it's sort of like a toned down version of Flight, but it fits Spider-Man. And then the last one is Team Up, right? Like, what's special about Spider-Man? Well, he's been an X-Men, he's been an Avenger, he's been with Marvel Knights. Everyone's friends with Spider-Man in the superhero community in Marvel, right? So he has a cool ability called Team Up. And it says at the start of the issue, if Spider-Man is the only figure that doesn't share the same team affiliation on your team, he gains that team affiliation. Which is nice. So if it's 4 X-Men and Spider-Man, he gains X-Men, because who doesn't want to team up with Spider-Man? And if you haven't seen that episode of Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends, you should go watch it, because there is an X-Men one.
And they're on Disney Plus.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, there's no, if you got Disney Plus, all that stuff is there.
Perfect.
So now, but if he teams up with the Fantastic Four, then at the end of the adventure, Johnny Storm will kick me on the back of him.
Yeah, we haven't done the Amazing Bagman. We haven't done some of the other variants of Spider-Man, but we'll eventually get to them.
It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that, just to recap, is sort of what's on the folio. The folios are on the website. You can download them, print them, cut them out. And I like to stick them in like clear plastic sleeves. You can get at Office Depot, use a dry erase, and then you don't have to print them out twice. Yep.
And again, just people search for, I'll put it in the show notes, but search for FASERIP Tactics. It's FASERIP Tactics, and you'll find the FASERIP Tactics webpage. It gets right down to business. You go to the homepage, and it tells you where you can keep up on social media. It's got your downloads. It's no nonsense. It gets you right into, you don't have to sort through a bunch of mess to get to what you want to go to. And right now, the published sets are Marvel Takes Manhattan, Avengers Assemble, Reign of Doom, Secret Wars mini set, and Heralds of Galactus.
Heralds of Galactus, yeah. We have another set that's done, complete, and had we had a real year last year, would have been released. It's called Children of the Atom. So that set's done. I'll actually get it up sort of after this convention.
That's very 80s X-Men kind of.
Yeah, so just a real quick primer on the sets. The sets usually focus on anywhere from 2 to 4 core teams, and then we'll support whatever figures were in the previous set, whatever teams were in the previous set with some more figures, right? So, for example, the first set, the 4 core teams were Marvel Knights, Sinister Syndicate, X-Men, and Brotherhood. And then Avengers Assembled was our next release. That had Avengers, obviously the Masters of Evil, who wouldn't love them, Thunderbolts, and then Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D., and so on and so forth. And then Reign of Doom is Fantastic Four, obviously. Doom, and then also has the Inhumans, who are sort of always associated with the Fantastic Four.
Did you even try to come up with stats for Black Bolt?
In fact, I did, yeah. So
how did you handle his... Because he speaks and everything just gets wiped out.
If you have it up in front of you, you can click on him. But
I'm gonna click on
one last piece of the folio that I didn't address was, and this is big for me, is there's a bit of flavor text in the bottom corner, right?
I'm looking up Inhumans right now.
Okay, yeah. So in the flavor text, it's typically a quote. So, for example, Spider-Man's quote in his flavor text is, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's attributed to Ben Parker. So, so somebody like Black Bolt, in his flavor text, it makes clear that Black Bolt lives his life with restraint because his whisper can shatter mountains. Yes, so. But that being said, he's also of legendary renown. So if you and me, for example, if Black Bolt was your favorite character, you and me might sit down to play, let's say, an HHHLL game. Okay, and that would be pretty high, and 3 heroics.
Right.
So you might pick, let's say, he likes teaming up with the Fantastic Four. So let's say the Thing, who's legendary, Black Bolt, who's legendary, his Queen Medusa, Triton, and Karnak, right?
Okay.
And then I might decide to oppose you with Dr. Doom, who's always messing with the Fantastic Four and the Inhumans. Let's say Kang.
You statted up Lockjaw. I just have to point that out.
Lockjaw, absolutely set it up. Lockjaw. He's essential, right? He's transportation.
Yeah.
So, and then I might pick a legendary like Dr. Doom, another legendary like, I don't know, Absorbing Man, and then I might pick the Wingless Wizard, Claw, and another minion of Doom, and let's say the Mole Man as my heroics. And that would be basically how we build our team, and we're done. I think we just go play.
Yeah,
and,
see, he definitely has sonic attacks.
Oh yeah,
Like, well, they do a lot of damage. So
yeah. And underpinning all of the game, I mean, it is a comic book game. It's faithful to the comic books, but we think we've got a pretty solid tactical war game underneath the hood that's reasonably balanced. When we create sets, we bucket the characters into archetypes, and then we compare them against other archetypes to make sure we're not completely obsoleting an old figure, right? So, and one of the nice things about being a living game is that if we do introduce a new feature or think we obsoleted Storm 3 sets later, we can always go back and tweak her folio a little bit to make sure she's the Storm we want to have in our game. Right. So, yeah. Neat. So a lot of characters have been buffed slightly. For example, we released Havoc, and I couldn't help myself. I actually had to go back and change Cyclops to reflect the fact that he's immune to Havoc's
stuff. So, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you've got some, you don't shy away from the big folks either. You've got Apocalypse, Annihilus, Thanos.
Yeah, the set you're looking at now, So there is a level above Legendary that we introduced in the Fantastic Four set called Cosmic. Right, because we had to introduce the Silver Surfer. And the Silver Surfer is a cut above even folks like Professor Xavier and other legendaries. So Cosmic would be your Thor, Silver Surfer. You mentioned Thanos, Annihilus, Adam Warlock. Those are your Cosmics.
So from a game balance perspective, like Galactus is more like a force of nature. He's more like a situation.
We've been trying to figure out how to do Galactus, and I think we haven't done it yet, but we're thinking he'd be more like a scenario than a character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a situation. Because it's just too ridiculous. So.
Yeah, we wanted to get a scenario done by the Secret Wars mini set and publish it by then. We just didn't get to it. So
that would have actually been thematically appropriate.
Oh, perfect! Yeah,
Galactus was in the Secret Wars.
Correct.
He's like, I'm going to eat Battle World.
Yeah, he's just going to eat Battle World, right? Yeah.
Which is very Galactus. So.
Yeah. So the Secret Wars mini set has some. Anyway, if you're into Secret Wars and love it like I do, you'll get all you need out of that mini set.
I'm a major nerd for that. That's right in the wheelhouse of some of my favorite comic era. I love it so much.
What started off as a ploy to simply make action figures turned out to be
ended up being
great fun.
A big deal. So
in summary, we think it's easy to pick up and play. You can also just use sort of the simple rules. The combat has some really advanced stuff you can do, like charging and anyway. You can play the game at a really simple level if you want, or you can play it at a really complex and deep and tactical level and use all the rules in the rule book. So, and we're always looking for feedback, and if you have any questions on how to play or there's some suggested teams in the rules, I've got pictures in there with how to do certain things. But if you need any help, just hit us up online in that Facebook group, and we're happy to help. So, yeah.
Have you seen anybody on Facebook or Twitter or anybody like playing it almost like play by post, or like they get their video cameras set up and play that way?
Yeah, it's something I really would love to do. I just don't have. Didn't have the time or the equipment to do it. I've got some nice webcams now because of COVID and all the stuff we've had to do professionally over the last year just to be a little bit more equipped. So coming out of COVID, I've got some nice webcams. So yeah, I'd love to do some.
Because you could do a top-down camera.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And then just have one person moving the pieces around.
Yeah. Or even play out some real games. It's a great idea. I think we should do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool. So, last question I have. I know you have Children of the Atom coming. How many characters drop per release? I guess?
So the major sets, or the full sets, I believe they're all the same. I believe they're 40 characters.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And yeah, like I said, there's always some core teams we want to focus on, so we'll try to introduce some new teams. And then what we like to do is to throw 2 or 3 figures from all the prior teams in together to put some fresh blood in there. And then we'll usually end each set with some teamless kind of folks.
Right.
So, example would be like in Marvel Takes Manhattan, our teamless guys are Ghost Rider, Hulk, right? So Hulk is kind of at least not in the not Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hulk leaves the Avengers pretty early on in his career. Issue 5, yeah. But then we have some sneaky ways to give Hulk team affiliations.
Issue 5, or is he leaving before then? He leaves quick.
He leaves quick.
No, he leaves after the first issue.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Issue 5 is, I think, is where they find
Captain America. Yeah, so there'll be some teamless guys, but a lot of our teamless guys are fun and have ways to give them team affiliations that hark back to some comic book related thing. E.g., if you have Elektra, she's normally teamless, right? She's a heartless, cutthroat assassin, the deadliest on Earth, unlike her garbage Netflix depiction. But she in the game essentially is teamless unless you control a Daredevil or a Kingpin.
And then she'll
Allegion with one of them. And depending on if you're a good team with Daredevil or an evil team with Kingpin, she gets a different ability. So, yeah, really, I've really thought through every character, and I have an encyclopedic knowledge of Marvel characters. So, I'd like to think I got the characters right.
Right.
A big term that gets thrown around a lot in both role-playing games, video games, movies is comic book accurate.
Right.
So I'd like to think I got that part of the game right. But anyway, feel free to always contact me with feedback. So if you don't like the way I did Quicksilver, I'll try again.
So you'll listen. Well, I certainly hope that I look forward to playing again. And I hope that you get some more, because the amount of time and effort and love that you've put into this game, I'd love to see more and more people. I think there are a lot of people out there that are like, they want to play this game, they just don't know it.
Yeah,
right? They haven't heard about it. Price is right. The game's done extremely well. I can say from personal experience, it's fun. I think I like it. I'd have to play it again, but I mean, I think I might like it better than HeroClix.
Sure.
Even though, like you, I've had fun with HeroClix, and I'm not down on HeroClix at all.
Yeah.
So, but it does feel more like an homage to what comic books are, rather than a war game using comic book characters. Right?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, we wanted to make an homage to this awesome role-playing game that we all loved as kids.
Yeah. Plus, it has that great retro factor. It's got that seasoning, that DNA from a wonderfully fun RPG.
Yeah, if any of your listeners have played the RPG, for example, but maybe they have kids that don't necessarily have the attention span to play the role-playing game, but they want to get that same feel, it could be a fun game to just play with your kids. It'll introduce them to the comic characters. They'll learn some math, and you'll have a good time. Yeah.
All right. They'll learn without realizing they're learning. So again, this is FASERIP Tactics. And FASERIP is from the original Marvel Superheroes game from TSR. That was kind of the underlying mechanic of the engine. And it'll be in the show notes, links to like the Facebook and the website where you can get all this stuff. It doesn't cost anything. It's fun to play. It plays well. Oh, another thing I should ask, what's the average length of a battle?
Once you kind of know what you're doing, you should be done in 45 minutes at the most.
Okay.
If you want to go crazy, again, since the team building is really simple, we could go with 8 heroics and 8 legendaries, and we probably won't finish for a couple hours.
So the team building scales is what
you're
saying.
Yeah.
It can scale up.
You want a 30-minute game, just play with maybe 3 characters each. Yeah.
Okay. Well, very good. So search for FASERIP Tactics. I do recommend you check this out. It's a very fun, well done game, and I've got photos from when we played a couple of years ago that I've been meaning to do a blog post anyway, so I'll try to get that together as a companion piece for this podcast. So, other than Children of the Atom, you got any other thoughts for a future?
Yeah, we've got, because of the kind of the clog of last year, I've got a bunch of sets in the backlog. So I'll go ahead and get Children of the Atom released. But, yeah, we have like an Armor Wars themed set coming out that's pretty much already in the books. We're going to go back to Manhattan eventually to really buff up the SpiderMan stuff. We have a Gamma-themed set that's pretty much done. And then as far out as we've gotten, we wanted to do a space theme set with a real focus on the 80s X-Men
Like
Phoenix
the
Saga.
Shi'ar,
Shi'ar. Yeah,
and
exactly.
all that,
Yeah, so we have a set that's going to be there. And then the cadence is essentially we do 3 big sets, then a mini set, 3 big sets, then a mini set, right? So the first mini set was Secret Wars. We also have another mini set that's
now,
almost...
what differentiates a mini set? Just the amount of figures?
Correct, yeah. A mini set is only 8 figures.
Right.
Yeah, and it usually is, like I said, just around a really iconic mini series. Secret Wars was the first one we wanted to do. The second mini set is actually around Secret Invasion, which was a fun mini series a few years back that got the Skrulls really right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, excellent. Well, any last thoughts or comments there?
No, it's like I said, try it and try it. Give feedback. Just want to see people playing it and having fun, and provide feedback, and that's all we can ask for. Hopefully, this year will be a better year as far as conventions. I will be at Gen Con, which has gotten pushed back to October, I believe.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah. So Gen Con, we usually get at least. I said before 20 or 30 people have demoed the game, but it's actually more than that if you count walk-ups at Gen Con, so you get a ton of foot traffic. So I'll be at Gen Con with all the stuff because I drive there, so I'll have, as Shane knows from the previous North Texas, if you are familiar with the original role-playing game and you know the Universal Table, I believe I have the world's largest Universal Table.
Yeah, the largest. Yeah, it's huge. You can't miss it.
It's a giant banner, so we'll have that hanging up. We'll have pre-built teams. And we'll play it probably at Gen Con next. I don't think I'll make it out to Origins this year. So if that's something you normally do, stop by, say hello, and play a pickup game.
Very good. Well, all right, true believers, you've heard it straight from Ned Leeds' mouth. Check it out, FASERIP Tactics. It will scratch your comic book, RPG, and wargaming itch. So check it out. Thanks again for your time, Ned. I really
no problem.
It. And I really do. I know I keep saying this, but I'm very impressed with FASERIP Tactics. So done a very amazing job with it. So
awesome. I appreciate the feedback. Yep.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks. And I didn't get a chance to share the bad joke of the week with my guest Ned Leeds, but I will share it with you, dear listener, because I know that you care so much, and I care so much for you. So here we go. When's the best time to buy a bird? I don't know, Shane. When is the best time to buy a bird? When it's going cheap. Yep, that was just as good as you want it to be. I know. All right, thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.